Hey there, a lot going on. Update on my mental health, stuff about the direction of the channel, and then a gentle rant about my misdiagnosis. Welcome to 2E ADHD. I'm Joel, and this is where I talk about what it's like to have the conflicting forces of the avoidant personality of autism and the seeking personality of ADHD in my head, and then on top of it, the high IQ that complicates everything. So, first, an update on my mental health. The last video I did was about how very sad I was feeling. And my body has finished calibrating the new antidepressant. And let's face it, would anyone wear a shirt with bananas all over it if they were still sad? This morning's been really good. So things are better, and I'm anticipating more better. More good, more better, many betters. Been working on an overarching, all-encompassing rebrand that would make this the flagship, but would also bring in all the other parts of my life, my creative online life. So watch for a video about that. Now, let's talk about my recent attempt to get diagnosed with autism. There is still no such thing as an ADHD diagnosis. So I'm going to try and tell the story briefly. Got the referral, found someone who could do it. The psychiatrist called to do the intake on the phone. Asked if I had any questions. I said, so how will my 6 decades of masking affect this? And he said, we'll see right through that. So the test is administered by someone with a master's in psychology working towards their PhD. And most of the test was a repeat of the IQ test that I did about a year ago, which came up with approximately the same result. But then there were 2 other tests. One of them was about storytelling, and I could tell this was how's my autism. And then the last one was the personal assessment inventory. And I'll talk about why that threw a spanner in the works, as they say. But I got the letter a couple weeks later, and it said that I was socially awkward when I arrived, that I had many autistic traits, but I didn't meet the criteria. For the first 24 hours, I was crushed. I was in a dark black hole. And then my autistic daughter got home from her trip to San Diego. And I said, well, I got my diagnosis, and her face brightened. And I said, and they say I'm not autistic. And she laughed and laughed. And then she realized I was serious. And she said, that's wrong. And we talked about it for a while, and she and her mom and I talked about it. And by the next day, I had realized that I absolutely didn't believe the diagnosis. And my wife said, you know, we really wanted to just go along with what the doctor said. But looking again at all of everything that we've seen anywhere about ADHD, which is not autism, and it's not ADHD. It is a whole new thing. And it's all just me. There's one video that lists 100 things that might indicate you have ADHD, and I have 98 of them or something like that. Every place you can take an official pre-screening test online, or anything by YouTubers who are ADHD, who talk about their own experience, it's always me completely. Autistic ADHD. And one thing that I think really messed up the attempt at the diagnosis, and this seems to be common, is first of all, the DSM-5, which lists all of the diagnostic criteria, talks about actions, how you behave, not how you think. And it is aimed at children who have not really learned to mask, so their behaviors reflect how they really think and feel. Now, the personal assessment inventory is 344 questions, like, would you rather go to a concert or a library? Would you rather go to a party or be alone? They're all in the present tense, and they're all about activities. What would you do? How would you act in these circumstances? And we'll get back to that. But when my daughter took the same assessment, she was in a quiet room. Her mom was on the other side of the desk taking the same assessment, another point we'll come back to. And she got one question on the screen, answered it. Another question, answered it. So she saw one question at a time in a quiet, calm environment. And her mother helped by giving her perspective. We had finished, I thought, the whole analysis. And as we walked out to the waiting room, the person who was administering the test said, "Oh, fill this out," like it was a customer satisfaction survey or something, and handed me a clipboard and a little booklet. And so I sat down in the waiting room where there was a really happy little kid running around and playing, and two receptionists answering the phones that rang endlessly. I sat down in a waiting room chair with this slippery plastic booklet with 344 statements in it, and a clipboard, a letter-sized clipboard with a legal-sized answer sheet, which, and if you're like me, you are now cringing, legal on letter, with all 344 answer slots laid out there for me to freak out over. And I sat there balancing this slippery plastic thing on one knee. The little kid wasn't annoying, but let's face it, you're trying to think deeply about psychological things, and there's a happy child playing, and his mother kept trying to shush him, and the phones are ringing. And again, every question, present tense, how would you act? The questions needed to be, when you were a child, how would you have felt? Those are meaningful questions in my case. Because guess what? Now I might choose to go to we went to a Super Bowl party last Sunday. My wife and I jokingly argue about who cares less about sports. But they were very dear friends who love sports. We knew the house was going to be full of friends. I don't get out enough. And so we went. We had a nice dinner. We ignored the game and sat out in another room and visited. But that's not what I would have chosen to do at any other time in my life. And it didn't come naturally to me because that's not who I am. Change of venue. It's quieter out here in my workshop. So, how I behave now is not how my brain works. It does not reflect my brain wiring. So this questionnaire was confusing. The whole circumstance was confusing, and so I was not concentrating. I had an inkling that what I needed to do was be 7 again and think about what mattered to me then. And sometimes that came out, and other times it was just, wait, what would I do now? And so at the end of the report, it talked about how inconsistent the responses were in the personal assessment inventory, but it pointed out the check questions showed that my responses were true and accurate. And that was it. No further comment on that about, hey, half of them said this, half of them said that, and they're both correct. What's going on here? Nothing. And nobody ever considered asking my siblings or my mom, not that I'm really sure any of them would have been able to contribute much. They could ask my wife, who's known me for 52 years, and she could have really informed that personal assessment inventory and helped guide me toward honest, realistic answers. Then none of that happened. It was just me in the waiting room with a legal size answer sheet on a letter size clipboard. And when I got the report, I waited and waited for the follow-up call to talk about it, like happened after my psych eval a year earlier. Because of the brain damage from long COVID, there was a call afterward. We went through the whole thing, lots of questions and answers, and it was really helpful. And this report that was confusing and I think inaccurate, no follow-up, nothing again. Which I think really doesn't matter because I would have questioned all of the things in it. And I know how health professionals feel about the patient saying, nuh-uh. So that's why I still firmly believe that I am autistic with ADHD. The high IQ part, that 2E, that's been diagnosed twice in the last year. IQ is, well, it puts me well into the 99th percentile. So the only part of it that doesn't really matter to me is the part that I've had confirmed twice. So that was my journey through misdiagnosis, and we're going to try again. New insurance at the beginning of the year, and the place that I've been going to get my antidepressant and to see my weekly therapist, who is different from my monthly therapist. They do autism and ADHD diagnoses, and this place feels it just feels different. It feels like they would understand me, like they would be actively trying to figure out who I am. I'm just expecting a different experience. But before I got that diagnosis, the reason I desperately wanted a diagnosis is that for my entire life, I have known two things that hurt. I've always been very socially awkward, and I guess a refinement of the socially awkward. I've always been a kind of a jerk when it comes to conversation. I talk too much, I interrupt, I don't let other people talk, and I don't notice any of those things. Even now, I struggle with it in spite of all the years of masking and watching and studying how humans behave. And so the diagnosis of depression, OCD, somatic symptom disorder, okay, that covers a lot of things that are true about me, but it says nothing about why I've kind of been a jerk when it comes to social interaction my whole life. So does that just mean I was never taught any manners because we were white trash that lived out in the woods and I'm just a hillbilly at heart? That hurts too much to believe. And that, more than anything, is why I wanted the diagnosis that would say, it's your wiring, it's not your fault. You can still work on it like you've been doing for over 60 years, but the way you've been is not your fault. But once I got this diagnosis, misdiagnosis, I believe, and reacted to it and talked to my autistic daughter and my wife, who's known me, like I said, over half a century, and we all agreed, no, this is you. Autism, ADHD, it's you. I've realized that a diagnosis would be nice to have, but it is nowhere near as important as it used to be because the imposter syndrome is almost completely gone. It's still there a little bit, but not much. And so I know who I am and what I am and how my brain is wired, and I'm going to move forward from there. And I hope you'll move forward with me and watch for probably be the next video where I'll be talking about some exciting new stuff around these parts. Odd thing that just occurred to me. Well, it occurs to me at the end of every video I record, and I decided now's as good a time as any to talk about it. I'm one of these people that gets attached real quickly, and I tell people that I love them long before they're ready to hear it. And I tell friends at the end of a phone conversation, I finish with, I love you. It's a thing I do. And every video that I've done for this channel, when I finish, the way I want to finish is to look into the camera and tell you, I love you. Because that's how I really feel. The people who have struggled like me for decades and who are just now finally figuring it out, I care deeply about you. And yeah, this stuff is for me. I'm recording these to get the thoughts out of my head. But I see you and I hear you in the comments. I hear you in the forums that I'm part of. And I love you. And I'm going to just finish my videos that way, okay? I hope that's okay with you. Get used to it because I love you. See you next time.